Morning and tato, everybody, and welcome to the Alicia McKay show on today, Friday, the 16th of September. Very early call out to Wiki or Te Reo Māori. I've very much enjoyed seeing so much more. Thank you, Charlie. Reo, in the media, at school, and everywhere we go over the last week. I love it. I think it's fantastic, and we need to keep that going. And look, I got distracted because my child walked in to bring me a book that I had asked her to bring me, because last night I went to an author talk with Sarah Winman, who is the author of a very popular book that came out that you may be aware of, came out last year, called Still Life. It is a beautiful, beautiful novel, and it very, very quickly became extremely popular. And so I'm missing most of Verb Wellington, the Readers and Writers Festival this year, unfortunately, because I am going to be away. And so I'm doing my best to get to the events that are slightly outside the classic schedule. But the Sarah Winman event, I read this book, I think over the summer, and I absolutely adored it. And I had it in my calendar, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. And so yesterday I sort of went about my day doing things, being a busy human. And then all of a sudden it was time to pick the kids up from school. As it is, I picked the children up from school. We came home. I was sort of rattling around doing their things, and then I had to walk the dog. And I looked at the time. I think I got a calendar notification. In 1 hour, you need to be in Wellington, which is about 25 kilometres away from where I live. You need to be in Wellington at this author talk. And my impulse, my instinct was to be like, oh, well, like, I've still got to cook dinner, and like there's a bunch of stuff I haven't done yet, and I'm out walking the dog. So I guess that's that, that's a bit sad. And then in the lovely way that walks do give you perspective, and being outside and moving your body makes it possible for you to maintain some kind of better perspective on the world. And I don't know whether you experience that. And if you do feel free to comment if that's your experience. And I was sitting at the top of the lookout by my house, and I was like, what am I thinking? Look, is that the kind of life I want to live? Do I want to live the kind of life where an international best-selling author of a book that I adore is 25 k's away, and I've got tickets to go and see her speak, and I'm going to choose to stay home and wipe the bench or whatever? Like, is that really the kind of life that I want? No, that is not the kind of life that I want. And so I text Charlie, the child who just popped in with said book, so that I could show it to you. There's lots of different covers for this book, but this is my personal favorite. And I was like, be ready to go in 5 minutes and make sure Harriet is too. And then I just sort of started running back to the house with the dog, which the dog loved. And Charlie's like, okay, Harriet's literally making noodles, but fine. And so I came in the door, and there's like noodles everywhere because my 7-year-old is making herself an early dinner, a late afternoon tea. I'm not really sure what was going on there. It was 5 o'clock. And I'm like, get in the car, and just kind of like put shoes on them and threw them in the car. And off we went. Now, according to Google Maps, we were going to get there about 5 to 6 minutes after it started. But thankfully, the universe decided that it was going to reward my values-based decision-making, and against all odds, gave me a smooth run through the terrace tunnel and round that corner, which is actually fairly unlikely at that time of the day in Wellington. So we actually got there bang on time. Anyway, there's the story of me trying to live my values and be a better person, and not put wiping the bench over going to this chat. And so we went along to this chat, and it is worth saying that while my children were the 2 or 3 that I had with me, while my children were happy to indulge my desire to be there, they had really not a lot of interest in being there themselves. Now, on the way to the event, I explained the plot of the book to Charlie, who is now reading it, actually. So this little red bookmark in there, Charlie was sucked in by the plot and has started reading it. But Harriet had absolutely no desire to sit for an hour in a hall at Wellington College while a bunch of old ladies, present company included, got excited about an author talk. And she expressed that fairly early on. So the price that I paid for being there was just a lot of sighing and silent tears and flopping around and tappings on the arm and how many minutes are left. But it was worth it. Now, one thing that was surprising about going to see Sarah Winman speak, who's terrific, by the way, is the discovery that she's also an actor, but not just an actor, a voice actor. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having an author read their book to you, but that's always kind of cool anyway. But Sarah Winman has a background as a voice actor, and I have since discovered voices her own audiobooks also. And so when she was reading passages from the story, she was doing so with these amazing character voices that she'd developed for each of the characters. Now, I'm going to be honest here, because, I mean, let me know in the comments if you are an audiobook lover. I've never had any desire to listen to an audiobook. It's one of the reasons why I haven't gone ahead and recorded any of my books on audiobook, despite people asking, because I've got this weird block around it. Like, I don't like being read out loud to. I don't even like my children to read me their own stories, usually. And so being like keeping people's ears, keeping people in my ears reading a story I like doesn't seem like something I want. I've always resisted it. And I'm not really sure why that is, because I love podcasts. I adore podcasts. And so I can see the appeal. But while Sarah Winman was speaking and she was reading her book, while I was absolutely loving hearing her characterization of the main characters in the book and reading it out, something in my brain was like, that's not how I heard his voice. And so I think one of my favorite things about books, and I've always been a big reader ever since I was a little kid, one of my favorite things about books is that you get to escape and create a world of your own. And yes, it's a world of your own that is clearly populated by people that somebody else has put there, living a life that somebody else is telling you the story about. But there's some kind of personal connection to a character that comes from reading them off the page, for me, that I don't get out of, movies or TV shows where it's really just kind of fed to you. Look, here's the person, here's what they look like, here's what they sound like. And I've always been worried that an audiobook experience would taint my personal connection with the characters that I'm reading about. And I guess on some very control freak level, kind of tell me what to do, tell my imagination what to do, which is an obscene thing to say when you're literally reading a book that somebody else has written. Anyway, I strongly encourage you to pick up this book if you've not read it. I did notice in the audience at Wellington College last night, and I don't know whether this is representative of people who've read the book or people who go to author talks on a Thursday night. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I will tell you that a solid 80%, probably more actually, I'm being generous, 9 out of 10 of the people in that hall were middle-aged women or elderly women. And conversations I eavesdropped on include, I haven't seen you out walking lately, which is ironic given I was out walking when I decided to go to the event. And I did have a small moment of reckoning with that. Like, is this my demographic now? Like, am I a 33-year-old woman who identifies more with a 65-year-old woman than anybody else? And honestly, there is a strong chance that the answer is yes. So I'm not sure if that's representative of the people who've read the book or the people who want to go to the event about the book. But if you are not a 65-year-old woman, I think you'll still enjoy the story very much because it is very good. There's a bit of art history to get through, but not in a bad way. So one thing that Sarah Winman was also amazing about, which I had very little expectation. I didn't know a lot about the author. I only had a connection with the book, is that she was drawing these incredible contextual links between the time that she wrote the book and what she was hoping to kind of bring in contextually into the story. And she was talking a lot about Brexit, post-Brexit Britain. And I'd never even thought to make that connection. I'd only ever just been involved in the story. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then while she was not asked about the death of the Queen, she did offer a perspective on the death of the Queen, which is probably the shortest, simplest, and most useful interpretation or perspective that I've heard to kind of sum up what's been going on in the world around us over the last week since the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. And she said, look, I think it's important when we recognise an event like the death of the Queen to be clear about the difference between the person and what they represent. And she said the Queen was a magnificent woman, but she represented something much bigger that we need to talk about. And that's not what she said. I'm paraphrasing. Like, she said something to that effect. And it was just such a delightful and simple and heartfelt way to kind of sum up this maelstrom of madness that has been taking place in the media and popular culture over the last week since the Queen died, because the death of the Queen, much as the life of the Queen was, is very symbolic. And I don't think we should be surprised by that, because the life of the Queen was symbolic. She, in New Zealand, is still our symbolic head of state. She lived a life as a symbol. And the fact that her death is now being interpreted as symbolic and meaningful and representative of other things that need to be discussed is entirely appropriate and should be expected. So I wrote in Wednesday Wisdom this week about the nature of, plot twists, built on this kind of novelist theme, the nature of plot twists and inciting incidents, which is when something unexpected or significant happens that encourages the plot to move in a different direction, because you get to ask different questions about parts of the character's life or the context that the character or the protagonist lives in that now can be reevaluated. It's necessary to ask those questions. And I think this is an inciting incident. But there's been such a passionate contribution to this conversation from the full spectrum. If you've been on Twitter at all this week, you will have seen just an absolute litany of tweets ranging from the offensive to the hilarious to the insightful. And so I've been kind of absorbing all of that, because I've been fascinated, I guess, at a meta level by how people respond, because we've got some really steadfast royalists, not just out there, but here in New Zealand. And when I sent out my Wednesday Wisdom this week, where I talked about using this inciting incident to challenge the history of oppression that is colonialism, and to think about what kind of world we want going forward, whether we need accountability for that, how we bring the voices of the marginalised and oppressed into the conversation. And I didn't think it was too offensive. It was a call to contemplate. But I got a few really long, really passionate emails from royalists who really found what I was saying to be really offensive and upsetting. And they just said, look, you can't do the Queen a dirty like this. That's the TLDR. That is not what they said. And I was quite blown away by that, because it was a really passionate response. And recognizing that there is not just people who held a lot of love for the Queen herself as a person, and certainly there are a lot of people who feel that way, and I understand that the line at the moment to view the Queen's coffin is currently about 8 kilometres long, so in the UK, so there are a lot of people that feel that way, but also about the monarchy and what the continuation of a constitutional monarchy in the United Kingdom and in the Commonwealth represents. And so I thought that was really interesting. And I've been trying to understand and really put myself in the shoes of people who are defending that. Because from my perspective, which is obviously just my perspective, I think, well, why on earth? Like, how absolutely mad that we still are going to prop up a monarchy, a publicly funded monarchy in 2022, and that we're going to continue to support the reign of a regime that has been so destructive and oppressive to so many millions of people throughout history, through colonization and then through the fight for independence. And that I can't wrap my head around why that would be something that we would even create time for anymore. And because my personal bias, my personal soapbox is around kind of embedded classism in society, unchallenged hereditary rule is the ultimate classism. It's like, well, you were born, so here you are. Have a nice life. The fact that we still have hereditary monarchy that even exists in 2022 in the global north, to me, is just absolutely baffling. And that kind of classism surely is not something that we still feel is aligned with our values as a modern society, as we're moving forward and making strides towards progress and inclusion on gender and race and class and culture. But maybe it is. And so why is that? And so I've gone digging into thinking about why we've got such not just personal feeling for the Queen herself, but impassioned connection to the monarchy as an institution and to the continuation of that in the UK and elsewhere. And the most convincing kind of opinion I've read on this so far is that really what the Queen offered, the Queen herself and the Queen as a symbol, what she offered over the last 70 years was steadiness. She offered constance. She offered continuity in a world where a lot has changed, so a lot of the articles and the features that are paying tribute to the life of the Queen necessarily talk about all the things that she was part of and observed and lived through in her time as Queen, which included, 171 prime ministers, 15 of whom were the Prime Minister of the UK, but across the different realms that the British Empire at that time, and then later on the Commonwealth, have a symbolic or ongoing role in. 170-something prime ministers. Like, that is a lot of churn that one woman has been this kind of figure of reliability and steadiness throughout. And the wars, the conflict, the technological change, the social change, the way we've come to understand ourselves, pandemic, financial crises are many. When you really look back on somebody who has not just observed 70 years of history, but had a significant symbolic role in that time, that's almost unheard of now. We don't have that kind of continuity in modern society, and things change so quickly. The news cycle is so fast, technological change is so fast, that I think you could be forgiven for placing real value in just something staying the same. That makes sense to me. And I went and had a look at all of the different public tributes and official statements that had come out of different administrations and different groups across the world. And it was really clear to me quite quickly how many of those official statements paid direct acknowledgement or tribute to that constancy. So US President Joe Biden, his statement was that Queen Elizabeth II was a stateswoman of unmatched dignity and constancy. The UN Secretary General, his comment was that she was a reassuring presence throughout decades of sweeping change. Justin Trudeau in Canada talked about a constant presence in the lives of Canadians. French President Emmanuel Macron talked about her continuity and unity for over 70 years. European Council President Charles Michel talked about, her monarch, Elizabeth the Steadfast, who was able to maintain lasting values in a modern world. And I think there's really something in that for us to sit with, that when we look back on the life of the Queen and the history of the monarchy, what has paid such direct tribute to and what we've really appreciated as a world, big we, not just royal we, like big we, is this sense of continuity and safety and being steadfast and things staying the same. And that comment from the UN Secretary General that she was a reassuring presence, while the word kind of went mad over that period of time, I think is really bang on and really insightful and really important. And so I think it has to be time, doesn't it? It has to be time to reconsider the monarchy in the UK, to reconsider the relationship of the monarchy to the Commonwealth, particularly in countries like Australia and New Zealand, which absolutely should be republics and should have been republics a long time ago. The fact that our highest court is still in the UK is just insane. It doesn't make any sense. I just, it seems so clear to me that that's something that happens now. But Sarah Winman made the point that while these conversations probably could have or should have happened earlier, they didn't have to, because we had the Queen, and we had the Queen for so long. Like, no matter how many prime ministers we had and referendums were held across the world on becoming a republic or not, and all these kind of things, we still had the Queen throughout it all, and the prime ministers would come and go, but the Queen would stay. And that sense of solidity kind of acted as a bit of a suppressant, didn't it? Like, it just kept things under wraps. It just went, well, we'll deal with this later. Like, the Queen is great, leave her alone. And I'm sure she was. She seemed great. But this long period of time that we've experienced that reliability and constancy is also a long period of time where we didn't ask questions and we didn't do much updating on our assumptions and our requirements and our thoughts around monarchy and Commonwealth. And so, of course, this is the time for us to now start reconsidering what that looks like going forward. And, I don't know how long we're going to have King Charles for. Who could tell? Great point from Stefan in the comments. Thank you. We no longer have the Privy Council. Thanks. This was Law 101. Thank you for that. The Supreme Court did take over from the Privy Council in the early 2000s. Absolutely. And so I think we can maintain some kind of connection to history without continuing to perpetrate the kind of inequality and classism and support for a legacy of oppression that we currently are. We can maintain connected to the UK and recognise that a huge part of our history is that we were a colony. But the irony has not been lost on me that we are, in the same week that we've declared a late notice public holiday to mourn the death of the Queen, where we've had surgeries postponed and events cancelled, massive impact to just call a national day off with such short notice, which ironically, when I listened to Christopher Luxon, which, as you know, if you're a regular listener of this show, on a Wednesday morning, one of my favourite things to do is to get angry at the radio, and Christopher Luxon's on RNZ on a Wednesday morning, defending that after being so outspoken about the potential impact of celebrating Matariki as a public holiday and how businesses couldn't possibly withstand further public health measures that might constrain their ability to earn or their ability to open, then going, oh, it's just a day, what are you on about? Like, be cool. We love the Queen, was just an absolute slap in the face, although no surprise to see that hypocrisy there. But the fact that we're doing that, we're doing all of that in the same week that we're also trying to celebrate Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, which we need because we were colonised and stripped violently generations of Māori from their culture and their language. And we're now trying to do something about that generations on. And the fact that we're trying to both honour that colonial history and turn the curve on it at the same time, I think, is just very timely evidence of this tension and the illustration that it is simply no longer appropriate for us to have deference and connection to a hereditary, publicly funded, classist system of rule, which has a legacy of tortured oppression and colonization that has impacted not just nameless, faceless colonies around the world, but our very own people. And that if we are serious about honouring te tiriti in our law and the way that we govern and the way that we run this country, and if we are serious about forging a future as a truly bicultural nation, then we cannot continue to have a monarchical symbolic head of state. We can't. We just can't. It's not even a question. We just can't have it. And I get it. Like, the Queen was great, and so we just sort of let that sort of run on for a bit in the way that you do. But this is the time for us to have that conversation in New Zealand. And I think has the potential to really be a huge kind of turning point for us in the way that we do start to look toward our future as a nation that's not a former colony and not an us and them, but genuinely coming together with a new kind of unity that I think we are ready for. I think the general public is ready for. It's time. It's time, New Zealand. Just looking in the comments, really appreciate the comment on YouTube that when you've got the likes of Boris Johnson in charge, it's reassuring to know there's a grown-up in the background. So I made the choice. I had a choice to make this morning about whether or not I shared some of my favourite kind of tweets and memes about this, because there's been some very, very wickedly clever commentary, and decided not to go there because I think you can spend enough time curating your own social media feeds. But this kind of idea that they're just what was the final straw for Queen Elizabeth was meeting Liz Truss and the idea of another Tory Prime Minister, I do have some kind of sympathy and lightheartedness for. And actually, it's funny you say that about the reassurance of having somebody in the background in charge who we can trust, because Jordan Peterson, who you will be unsurprised to learn I'm not even remotely a fan of, I think he's a real problem, but for lots of reasons, we can have that chat later. But Jordan Peterson was about to go on stage in, I think, Scotland, because he's on tour in the UK at the moment, when the news broke that the Queen had died. And so he got a couple of curly questions thrown to him on stage around the future of the monarchy, not just for, obviously, for England, for the UK, but also for the other countries who have a history of connection with the British Empire, which it should be noted that when the Queen first began her reign, over a quarter of the world's population lived within the realm of the British Empire. More than 700 million people were in that empire. It's not a small figure. It's most of the world has at some point either been under British rule or been affected by the impacts of British rule. This is not like a minor issue whatsoever, but I'm sure I'm preaching that to the converted. Anyway, so Jordan Peterson was asked, and he really pissed in the pocket of constitutional monarchy when he was asked this question, and he really was like, in his little voice, he was like, there's a real wisdom in constitutional monarchy. And everybody's like, wow, such wisdom. You're so cool, Jordan Peterson. But one of the points he made was that we need something in the background that's holding the political machine to account. And his comments were that, you might have prime ministers with what I think he termed monarchical aspirations, who consider themselves to be more royal than democratically elected representative, which, looking at the embedded classism in the UK, does make sense, particularly when you look at that kind of really reliable churn out system of go to the right school, know the right people, get into government, be the boss, which is like just still super, that whole upper class structure is really still pretty intact in the UK. That when you've got the potential for political leadership with monarchical aspiration, that also, because of the nature of the machine, even in Westminster democracy, because of the nature of the machine, is just kind of a bit conflicty and not always in the best interests of the people, and a bit flighty, that it is nice to have this requirement in the background that they have to report back to and connect with a much longer term institution that isn't going anywhere and isn't dependent on the whims of voters and whatever's happening in the world in order to stay in power. And so his argument was that having that sense check and that accountability on political power, if it's done well, is potentially a great thing. And I don't think that argument is without its merit, if the argument is around constancy and accountability. But unfortunately, the version of it that comes with monarchy is a complete lack of transparency. And actually, if we really look at what the powers still are of the monarchy, which, a lot of people say, look, it's not an institution that has any power anymore. Like it's not something for us to be too worried about, because, it's not like they're actually the boss. Like, we've handed it all over to the politicians, and she's just there to check in on things and make sure that things are okay. But actually, the royal prerogative, which is still in force in the UK, means that the Queen can allow the Prime Minister to do a bunch of fairly important stuff without the support of Parliament, should the Queen or the King decide that that's the right thing to do. And that includes declaring war, signing a treaty, or enacting legislation. So it is still legally possible, thanks to royal privilege in the UK, that if the Prime Minister and the ruling monarch or king or whatever of their mates, and the Prime Minister's like, really do want to start a bit of a war. Don't think I'm going to get it through, all my mates in cabinet or whatever, but could you just give me the say-so? The Queen or King can say, absolutely, go ahead, declare a war. Pass some law nobody will like. And that's terrifying that we've retained that. And I know that royalists will push back and go, oh, but they never would. And this is the beauty of the monarchy, is that, the royal family, they have such strong moral compass and dignity and values. And to that I say absolute bullshit, because if you look at the millions of people who were enslaved and killed as a direct result of the British Empire, that is an absolute load of shit. So I will not stand for that. And so the idea that we've got this check on power, I think, is a lovely thought, and definitely something that we should be continuously striving for in a democratic political system. We need that check on power, whether it's from the fourth estate through the media, whether it's from the separation of the judiciary and politics and parliament, and whatever other means that we can together build to create a more transparent and accountable system, a group of politicians that we really feel as though stand for us and that we can hold to account when they don't. I really don't think just picking a family and making them the boss of that makes a lot of sense in 2022, does it? Which is essentially what we do. We're like, nah, but that's a really good family. Let's just leave it up to them so the rest of us don't have to worry about it. Dumb. All right, it is 8:33 and I need to go and take my children to school. So if you have been on this rollicking journey of the Alicia McKay interpretation of the monarchical controversy over the last week, I do appreciate you coming along and being part of it, and also for so many of your comments and the chat across LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, the whole shebang. That is awesome. So look, go out and enjoy your weekend. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and I will see you back here next Friday. Ka kite, everyone.